All right, well, I'm John, and let me just ask a quick question. Any coastal jurisdictions here today? Environmental health, mostly? Okay. I know Riverside's here. That's cool. Okay, well, so Japan, tsunami, marine debris. Can't believe it's been almost 2 years since the tsunami happened and the problem with the Fukushima power plant. So I'm going to run through these quickly because I think we all pretty much know what the information is. But there's still about 1.5 million tons of debris out there. We don't know where it is. We don't know what it is. We have an idea. We've seen some of it hit the shore. Not too much in California yet. This is some of the images from Midway Atoll and Crescent City upper right. Hawaii and lower left. Santa Cruz was hit as well. You might recall that it wasn't a big wave that hit, but it was a pretty nasty little event that caused some damage. ESF-10, Anna Marie referred to this. This is our, under the National Response Framework and National Contingency Plan, EPA Coast Guard share, the responsibility for responding to incidents. That was stood up within 2 hours after the tsunami hit. Coast Guard did a lot of rapid assessment work early on small boats and docks in California and Hawaii, and then did some removal work as well, and we assisted them up in Crescent City and a little bit in Santa Cruz. Now, there were no state declarations for disaster, and the reason is it just didn't rise to that level. So this is just an image showing what the debris looked like right after the incident, but now it's so dispersed, satellites really aren't picking it up. And we have, NOAA has a pretty aggressive satellite partnership with the NGA and high-resolution satellite work, and they're just not picking it up. A little over a year ago, we participated with Coast Guard and Fish and Wildlife Service, and we did an overflight out of Midway Atoll. Here's the runway, here's the island. And we had to land at night because, as Anna Marie pointed out, there were millions of albatrosses, and they nest there, and so the only way we could get in and out was at nighttime. The overflight, we suspected the debris was about 1,000 miles out, but they wanted to go ahead and do it anyway, so you can see the little radius there of how far they got, and they didn't find anything. So some images from 2011 and 12. I'm sure you all saw the dock that landed in Oregon last year. You can see the workers scraping off the invasive species. There was no oil or hazmat or radiation associated with this event, and the invasive species was the incident. I mean, there was about a ton of material on there that they had to scrape and burn. They burned it off. The lower left is a ship that showed up off of Haida Gwaii and eventually southeast Alaska. This is the one the Coast Guard used for target practice and sunk. And then some other material. The Harley-Davidson was actually found to be a Japan tsunami debris item. They found the number on it. They were able to trace it back to the shop where it came from, and the shop owner apparently knew who he sold it to, so he restored it and gave it back to the owner. It was a nice story. So the dock, here's another image of it. Let me fast forward here. 165 tons of concrete, steel, and styrofoam. And after they cleaned it off, you can see the hull is very clean. They finally got a contract for about $85,000, $84,000 to have it removed. And what they did was they just sliced it up like butter into 5 pieces, I believe, and hauled it away. So there was some sailing activity this summer, and this was I guess it was a race, and this is the area where we had the sailors actually looking for debris. Also, too, last summer, the military was conducting exercises out in the Pacific, and they were all under orders as well. So we had a lot of boats on the water looking for debris, and we did get some sightings. So last September, there was this dock spotted off Molokai, and they lost it. So it just disappeared. Now we think this might be it. This showed up in Washington, Olympic Peninsula last month. As you can see, there's invasive species on the hull, and they have been working to get those off. This is in a very remote location. It's going to be very difficult to remove this dock. There have been over 1,500 sightings of potential debris, and only 20 have been confirmed. I say potential because we get a lot of marine debris on our beaches and all the time along the Pacific coast, and unless there's a serial number or some kind of marking to identify it, there's no way we can trace it back. So a year ago, my boss, Dan Muir, and Don Johnson with Cal EPA decided to pull a bunch of agencies together and raise situational awareness on tsunami debris and what might be coming our way. Now, at that time, that was a year ago, we thought we were going to get flooded with debris, and that has not happened yet. But as a result of the meeting, we formed this multi-agency coordination group, and then I convened a technical work group to work on a couple of different things. One was developing a contamination assessment protocol, and I'll show you a picture of it here in a minute, but basically that just represents what you guys do in the emergency response field. It just represents what you do every day. It's a protocol that just characterizes what you do, and it includes a radiation component. And I had a lot of people look at that one. Carl, I think you looked at it briefly. And so it just kind of lays out, and it was really kind of meant to show that we are consistent in our approach for assessing unknown contamination and debris, and on the radiation component, what is it we're going to do? And I think that provides some assurance to the public that all these agencies are working together and they're on the same page. Now, as far as the radiation goes, I'm sure you know that the tsunami hit, washed all that stuff out to sea, and it was like 5 days later when Fukushima Daiichi exploded. So that material had washed way out to sea before that event occurred, and when the cooling water, radiated water hit the ocean. So we also worked with the California Coastal Commission for the volunteer beach cleanup. They have a companion piece for how volunteers should handle debris and how to report it. These guidelines have been distributed all over the place, up and down the Pacific Rim, Alaska, over to Hawaii, down to Mexico, and they are on what's called the JIC website, the Joint Information website. And okay, before I get to the JIC website, I've got a couple questions for you. So, who's the lead coordinating agency for Japan tsunami marine debris? Anybody know? Pardon me? Coast Guard. Not Coast Guard. Not EPA. NOAA. Who said that? Who does the response and removal of debris found on the beach? Maybe. Maybe. Well, who would do it first? Wouldn't it be you? Environmental health? Local jurisdiction?
If it's on federal land, it's Coast Guard.
If it's federal land, you're right. And it hasn't happened yet, so we don't know who's going to really step up and take control of it. It might end up being a multi-agency kind of incident. So just some questions to think about. If it does land in your jurisdiction, what is your role? How are you going to get it done? And if there's hazmat, how are you going to address that? How will you get funded? Oregon spent twice its annual debris removal budget getting rid of that dock. That's a huge hit. Well, hopefully I can provide some help here. But first, I want to show you the JIC website. And this is the one-stop shop for all things Japan tsunami marine debris. There's great information on there, a lot of FAQs. And I'm going to run through some of the tools you'll see on there. So this is the contamination assessment guideline, and it basically runs through the roles of response organizations and what the procedures are. It's only 2 pages, very short. But if you want to look that up, it's right there. This is the California Coastal Commission guideline for beach cleanup volunteers. And my friend Evan Schwartz there stepped right up and said, absolutely, this is something that we should do, and he did. We got, I think this came from Japan via NOAA.
That was U.S. Navy. Got it.
Oh, Navy.
There are Navy people.
Okay. So this is really handy. If we see cylinders, we can now use this chart and translate it to English and figure out what it is. Anybody tell me what the bottle on the left is? Very good. Yeah, it's hydrogen. You can see the little red bottle on the right. We have now Japanese boat identification fact sheets. Where to look for the serial numbers, registration numbers. So this is really useful stuff. We don't know how many boats are still out there. The estimate is over 10,000. So that means there's that many boats heading this way, potentially. This is just a snapshot of the NOAA CODAR system. It's a coastal current modeling system. We threw this in because you can see the blue is kind of out here, but the yellow, orange, and red are concentrated currents bringing it right into shore, and this is up at Point Reyes. And right about where that red square is, very close to that, we have a shoreline monitoring plot. It's a NOAA plot. Actually, there are two. And these get checked every 28 days for marine debris, and it's basically just to characterize how much we're seeing and over time.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure. Yeah.
Just wanted to actually give a tiny bit more information on that. This is actually, the CODAR is run mostly by Scripps with the help of San Francisco State University up in the Romberg-Tiburon Center, and they have a network all the way down the West Coast, all the way through Washington, Oregon, down to the Mexican border, and to a large extent on the East Coast too. And this gives live feed information to a Scripps database, which has about a 1-hour time delay. And the beauty of this particular modeling is that it is updated on an hourly basis. And what we're hoping to do, we're very close, EPA is very close to finishing working on this. This is actually not NOAA uses this, but this isn't actually a NOAA product. It's from Scripps. But we've worked on tweaking the algorithms a little bit so that what we can do is provide this to coastal communities so that they can get an idea ahead of time of any potential debris that might impact their coastline with about an hour delay from the actual live feed. And also we are also working with the Coast Guard to use this as a search and rescue tool, because what you can actually do is drop a pin in at a point where you think there's a problem, if somebody was lost overboard or if there's some debris, and then track that to see where it's going to end up going towards the coastline so you can go and find it before it gets there. So this is an application that has many uses, we're hoping, and we are also trying to roll it out in the next month. So just to let you know that this should be coming down the pike. Thanks, John.
So as I mentioned, the guidelines are in place with all of the participating agencies and countries, including British Columbia. We actually have a biweekly call that NOAA sponsors, and typically we'll have about 60 people participating from all the different state, local, tribal, and federal agencies. And the neat thing about this is that even if we don't see really significant debris, the level of coordination, response coordination on this is pretty unprecedented, and it just makes us feel a lot more ready. Does anybody, would you call this an emergency? Anybody? No? If you would call it an emergency?
Yeah.
Why?
Pending emergency.
Pending emergency.
Right, because we may wake up one day and all this stuff is up on the shore, and then if you don't prepare for it, then no one will know what to do, and so it's better to be prepared in advance. So I think it is.
Okay, that's a good answer. I've never seen this much time to prepare for something that has a good chance of happening. It's always when an emergency happens, then you kick it in gear and go at it. So we've really had a luxury here of being able to do this. Cal EMA just issued their CONOPS for Japan tsunami marine debris, and basically what this document is, it's basically there to support the local agencies and just to characterize how the response will go, that SEMS will be followed, and identifies the agencies involved, who's doing what, and also the potential impacts and the phases of response and recovery. And then, again, all the agencies that are coordinating and the available resources. So it's actually a really good document. I would recommend reading it. Now here's the funding question. NOAA provided about $50,000 to each state last year, and that really wasn't a lot of money. In California, it went to Cal Volunteers and went out to the local beach cleanup coordinators just to provide them some additional resources to get ready. Japan, though, is providing $5 million to the U.S., and NOAA, again, will be the agency that distributes the money. They're giving each state $250K up front, and that's for this kind of work, like the CONOPS and preparedness. They're still kind of working out the rest of it, but each state enters into an MOU with NOAA, and they kind of work out how it's going to go. So if one of your local agencies does do a response and removal, you can apply to Cal EMA for reimbursement. This is good news. And I bet Oregon was wishing that they had this last year. So our ongoing activities, just providing presentations at forums like this. There's ongoing monitoring for debris at sea, satellite, shoreline. Certainly, those of you who are involved in your beaches, be another set of eyes, and you report the debris at marinedebris@noaa.gov. And in the event that we do get a dock or a vessel or some large incident, some item, then we can activate this response coordination group and work out these issues. And if it is a hazardous material or oil situation, where can we dispose of this stuff? And so just bring the heads together and figure it out. So that's the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Public perception, did the hazmat teams get called out to check for radiation?
Oh, good question. Thank you. Actually, I had a slide in here that I didn't point out. On all the big items, like the docks, certainly the boats, all of those did have a hazmat and radiation assessment. They really haven't encountered either. The boats that we have found are small fishing vessels, mostly under 25 feet, 20 feet. We don't know about the one that they shot down in Alaska because they thought it was too unsafe to enter it, so they just shot it down. They have assessed for radiation on all those items too. They have not seen anything. And now that's not to say we won't, but it's highly unlikely, and the whole community is pretty much in agreement that we're not likely to see it. But we don't know. I mean, we just don't know what's out there. Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
What's the current projection for that mass to get close?
Well, again, we don't know. There are some seasonal patterns to the currents. And so the winter pattern right now is the summer storms can potentially push in debris onto the coastline. In the summertime, you get a little bit more of a pattern that's off the coast, at least of California. Alaska, Oregon, British Columbia, to some extent, saw more debris because when you look at the coastal pattern from Japan over to, or Asia over to this continent, it's kind of an elliptical pattern. over and above and down below Hawaii. But there's another pattern that swings off and hits the northwest, and that, for some reason, carried a lot of that early debris up to the northwest. So it's kind of hard to say. Do you have anything to add?
I don't have a whole lot to add. The currents were initially used in the modeling to project where the debris was likely to end up, and what happened was the current models did not, the ocean current models did not take into account windage of objects, and also, you can't really predict what type of weather pattern is going to happen in any given year. And so what happened was the NOAA models and the models out of the University of Hawaii projected that the majority of the debris would come to the west coast around the Oregon, Washington, California area starting in March of 2013. A full year earlier than expected, we did end up with this debris up in the Alaska and British Columbia areas John referenced. And that was when we sort of came face to face with the understanding that windage was a huge factor. So the big things like the fishing vessel that the Coast Guard sank and the docks that are sticking way up out of the water do move much, much faster. The Harley-Davidson was in a container box. It was in like a storage locker, and that also had a high windage factor, so that brought it across faster. And then the weather patterns trended further north than they usually did, and so again, that contributed to it. So what has happened is the first wave of debris has gone to the north, up into Alaska and British Columbia, and now is working its way down with the currents towards Oregon, Washington, and to California. But it works in California's favor because a lot of the debris is ending up washing up against Oregon and Washington before it gets to California. So we've seen very, very little so far. And eventually it will join the whole Pacific Gyre, along with all the rest of the marine debris that goes out there every day in every way. And it will loop back south underneath the Hawaiian Islands and then just begin this slow clockwise rotation and sinks, eventually to the ocean floor, and occasionally wash up on the beaches of the Hawaiian Islands and occasionally on the west coast. So it's very hard to know, since we don't know how many pieces of debris are out there or what their windage is. It's hard to know just how much we're looking at. But John referenced earlier that they had calculated about 10,000 fishing vessels or types of vessels had been missing from the area where the tsunami hit. And even, if just 10% of those survive the ocean trek, we're looking at, somewhere around 1,000 vessels washing up along the coast. So it's an emergency that is a very slow-moving and very unknown endpoint.
So the current actually is offshore quite a ways, so we may not see most of it. But as Anna Marie said, the windage, can push items, but that are above water can push them onto the shore. So, yes.
Are there any plans, maybe internationally, to address that North Pacific collection of plastic and trash?
It gets into the wider problem of marine debris, and not just what are we doing nationally, but what are we doing internationally. So UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program, has marine debris as one of its top 3 priorities to work on, and convenes a number of international nonprofits, universities, and agencies, government agencies, to work together to try to figure out how we can curb this problem. And that it is a very challenging issue because different nations are at different levels of understanding and development. The UK has a number of programs in place that deal with packaging issues, deal with product stewardship type of issues where they ask manufacturers to take back the packaging. The U.S. doesn't work that way yet. We have other things in place. Usually it's best management practices that we work with. But I think that there is a concerted and increasing effort on an international level to try to address this problem as we become increasingly aware that it can't continue and that there are so many negative impacts occurring. Yeah.
So I'd like to address this gentleman's comment one more time about, is this an emergency? You know, right now it's not. If we get that dock, it could be. Do we have the tools in place to deal with it? Most likely. I think the biggest thing that we have to deal with, as we're seeing more and more in emergency response, is especially given this kind of incident, is the media and public perception. And if we learned anything in Fukushima 2 years ago and following, that perceived risk is you have to deal with perceived risk as much as you have to deal with real risk in a certain way. And Japan radiation did hit us, but in very, very, very minute amounts, way, way below any health concerns. Well, below the levels anyway that are set, action levels, health levels. But the perceived risk was so high that that's what we dealt with. And I don't think we have that level of situation here, but you know, if we see a wave of stuff, we could. So. Well, thank you all very much. Looks like you got a little break time early.